I have a rock star panel with me here today, Lindsay, Cherish, and John. I'd love it if we could start off with a quick introduction of you all and maybe explain a bit about why you do the work you do and why you're passionate about this topic of plug and play and EVs. Mm-hmm. Do you want to start?
Yeah, hi. Can y'all hear me through the microphone? No? Hello? Hey, that's better. I'm Lindsey McDougall with Austin Energy's electric vehicles team. Austin Energy is a community-owned utility, the third largest municipally owned utility in the United States. I've been on the team for 8 years with the electric vehicles team. I formerly managed the charging station network Plug-in Everywhere. It consists of over 1,200 charging ports, and I managed a suite of customer-facing rebates, including e-ride and home rebates and a commercial rebate for charging station installations. And now I got promoted to utility strategist, so I'm focused more on growth and scaling those programs and creating new programs for this massive adoption of electric vehicles we're expecting in the next 5 years. To me, plug and play gets me excited because it means accessibility and options, primarily for individual vehicle drivers is who I'm mostly focused on, and the equity of those drivers and making sure no one gets left behind in this technological transformation of transportation.
Hello all, good to be with you today. My name is Cherie Smith. I'm a director with Guidehouse. I'm on the mobility solutions team, focused on our energy provider or utility clients. I've been with Guidehouse almost 10 years now, and in that time I've had the opportunity to work across a variety of project types, focused on customer program, regulatory support, strategy, design, all the way through onto evaluation. The types of customer programs I've had the opportunity to work with include energy efficiency, renewable energy programs, rates pilots, and most recently, electric vehicle programs. Why am I passionate about this topic? As many of you may know, transportation sector is the leading sector of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really essential that we all come together across industry to advance transportation electrification and to really build a more sustainable and decarbonized future for us.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Great to be in the room with folks, and thanks to ETS for the invitation to come speak. John Fernandes with Customized Energy Solutions. We are a very markets-centric consulting firm. We are heavily embedded into ISOs and RTOs across North America. So all of us, we're experts on, I'll say, market design, tariff design. We're also a scheduling coordinator. We have a 24-hour operations center, 18 stories off the ground right downtown Philadelphia. So we're not an investor. We don't take any kind of position in resources. We bring resources from retail endpoints all the way up to bulk generators to the markets on behalf of our clients. In the Emerging Technologies group, aside from market design, we also do project optimization. We have an in-house modeling platform that can take, we really heavy into energy storage, grid scale storage, storage on wheels like electric vehicles. And so we do economic and operational optimization for developers, for investors. And finally, we do have, I call them our battery group. We do a lot of international benchmarking on performance, financials. We help newcomers to the manufacturing space I don't know that you can have a battery conference without saying gigafactory. So I've checked that box. We help them set up their gigafactory, even if it isn't giga. So in this space, when it comes to plug and play and when it comes to EVs, it's passionate for me and for us really because we have such a broad spectrum of clients, from the battery manufacturer to an aggregator or integrators in markets. And then on the opposite end of everything that gets done here, tariff design and market design, which enables more of this stuff to come online, which is pretty interesting as well. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, John. And I'd love to hear about how you would describe plug and play with EVs to someone new to the concept, or how do you see it at its fullest potential in our energy future?
Okay, I can start. So for me, plug and play is when all, and I'll use the term stakeholders. And so with electric vehicles, Again, I'll just start from where we operate. Battery manufacturers, car manufacturers, the utilities, the people that have to manage all this stuff on the grid. Cherish mentioned the drivers, integrators, aggregators. When everyone has efficient and I'm going to say somewhat standardized processes of being involved in electric vehicles across a broad geography, right? So we have the perspective of what happens at the individual utility level. We are very mobile in this country, and we don't live our lives within a single utility footprint. We do for the vast majority of the time, I'm sure, but I just took a trip across state lines with my family a week ago. And so being able to do this across footprints and jurisdictions, I think, is really important for the plug and play concept.
In building off of that, as John suggested, I see there's an opportunity to really streamline the customer experience across what many of us commonly see as barriers to customer EV adoption, including lack of understanding and awareness, initial costs, as well as EV infrastructure readiness. I've experienced, similar to John in his recent trip and becoming a new EV owner myself, despite being in the industry, many of these challenges myself, around lack of understanding and awareness, just the challenge of finding a comprehensive resource to understand whether a level 1 versus a level 2 charger would best meet my and my family's needs. Kind of furthermore, understanding within that level 1 and level 2 charging types, what models, specifications, features are best, and how does that align with the vehicle that we chose, as well as how does that align with the utility incentives that may be provided to help drive down costs. Furthermore, as we look at initial costs, there's a lot, the utility has played a very important role in driving down the costs of the chargers, as well as, supporting charging needs, through incentives in rates. Speaking to again, my drive, I ended up picking up a vehicle down Atlanta, drove across state lines very similarly. And interestingly enough, it wasn't the 10 turned 14-hour drive that I found most challenging. Granted, we were prepared for that, but instead the 4 to 5 apps that we ended up downloading prior to that ride, based off of our own homework, but also input from friends and colleagues who are EV owners on understanding what's the best to download in terms of EV route optimization versus interfacing with that particular charger to ease the payment experience. So all to say, I think that there's a role for utilities, but many to help streamline that experience and improve education and awareness, drive down initial cost through incentives and such.
Great points. To me, plug and play is very literal. I want drivers to be able to just pull up to one of our charging stations, plug in, and go play at one of our beautiful recreation facilities in Austin. It's not that easy, unfortunately. There is a multitude of apps to find the right one, and then you have to navigate to the right charging station depending on your car. We have this great program called Plug-in Everywhere that makes charging really low cost. It's $4.17 a month for unlimited level 2 charging, but it does require a sign up with Austin Energy's webpage. So, and you also have to have the ChargePoint app to access the ChargePoint station. So that's 2 levels of signups required to access that low cost. From like a manufacturer side, I also see plug and play as options for the manufacturers to get in on that program, to offer their charging station models on that program, but we don't have that level of consistency with payment and network plans to be able to have that kind of interoperability currently, but we'd like to see that. Some things that I'm doing personally with this program scalability for Austin Energy is trying to remove some of those sign-up barriers, perhaps come up with a rate that's accessible to all through just that ChargePoint app, it's really tricky because we have not found a network provider pricing plan that can do this unlimited $4.17 a month pricing plan that Austin Energy's billing system can do. So there's these trade-offs with ease of accessibility and affordability, and really finding where those pain points and for whom has those pain points, and what makes the chopping block here. Because we can't have it perfect. I'd like to, but in the interim, some things have to go, and we need to simplify things and make that plug experience a lot more easy for our drivers. In the residential space, we have programs and rates for drivers, residential drivers. We had a time of use called EV360 rate that involved a physical installation of a sub-meter at their home. The great thing is any charging station could work with that program, and it allowed unlimited level 2 residential charging off-peak for only $30 a month. If you charged off-peak, it cost more. But it was really bring your own device, bring your own level 2 device, any charging station. It didn't have to be communicating, it could be dummy, could plug into this. But we found that initial installation cost was so exclusive to our residents. You had to be a resident, you had to live there long enough to experience that return on investment. And so now we're transitioning to more of a communicating station approach. But the vendor we're working through only allows 2 charging station manufacturers through that program. We expect to see more, but do you see the trade-off we have here? Whereas before we had any model, but hard to enter, and now it's easy to enter, but limited models. So it's a constant balance with this plug and play, and I hope to find the sweet spot.
Yeah. Thank you for
John.
sharing that story. I didn't know about the $4 a month deal, and I'm in Austin, so I'm definitely going to take advantage of that and share with my EV-owning friends too.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about what you see as if utilities don't look into plug-and-play programs, what's the cost of inaction for utilities?
Thank you. My mic does not work. The cost of inaction is communities will be left behind, and unfortunately they may have to pay for this transition. There's a lot of revenue to be made with plugging in, but we have to get ahead of the finances of it and the rate design of it to make sure that the money we made is properly allocated to the right people, and that we can all take advantage of this transportation transformation that's happening in our community. I went on a hike last weekend in East Austin, and the viewpoint was directly to the Gigafactory. And I started telling my friends about the City of Austin's climate equity plan, where at the end of 2030, 40% of all vehicle miles traveled will be electric. And my friend asked me, what 40%? Feeling that she would not be a part of that. And I had to quickly, come up with a response, what my organization is doing about it. And we're doing a lot. We have a staff member who is dedicated to low to moderate income, and she is changing the way our organization is thinking about this. And it starts with our own team and teaching me how to identify how our programs reach the community. How come Laurel doesn't know about our $4.17 plan, and what I can do to change that messaging and reduce those barriers for everyone to get that low-cost access to charging infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. And, I think, in short, the price of inaction, we know, as Lindsay's just mentioned, transportation electrification is coming. It's here. But it's critical that utilities play a role, and there's an opportunity to help fill the gaps that are brought about, by the private sector and perhaps wouldn't be filled otherwise. There's benefits. It's a win-win situation, both for the utility and the customer alike, with additional revenue generation, but also kind of meeting those customers where they are at, and filling the gaps that may be presented in underserved communities, and really coming to the table to be a leader in this space and unlock the full potential for the societal, economic, and environmental benefits that transportation electrification can bring here.
Yeah, for me, the risk of inaction is having to play catch up, and that's utilities and regulators. And you don't, when it comes to policy, you don't want to be too far out in front because you want to let the market kind of figure out what best practices are, maybe get some engineering standards in place, get some consistency there. But I think this sector is there. And so someone said in an earlier presentation this morning, get out there and figure this out now on a smaller scale, and then as this all scales up, you're keeping up. So yeah, I don't think you want to play catch up. If we have best practices, get processes and procedures in place to reflect that, and then industry and owners and utilities have a clearer path forward to get this up to whatever percentages you might have in terms of penetration in a certain market.
Thank you, John. What are the key barriers or challenges that you've seen for utilities with EV infrastructure and how they can help standardize?
Absolutely. Great question. As we work with utilities and regulators across the country, from New York to Tennessee to California, we see a lot of common themes. First of which is around identifying a common cost-benefit, structure and model to ensure that we are, again, building out EV infrastructure in an equitable way. We heard a good discussion yesterday from EV Noir about how we have to be very intentional about addressing the inequities that have been brought about by the systems of the past. In that, while it's certainly important to ensure that we're addressing the underserved communities, but also thinking about equity from the standpoint of ensuring that there's equity across service territories, across jurisdictions and state lines, and really that kind of understanding where subsidization needs to happen, who pays for it. We have heard questions such as what happens as drivers drive across state lines. What happen? Is it appropriate for that Michigan ratepayer, for instance, to pay for that Ohio ratepayer? Rivalry aside, for those of you that may be familiar with it, but we hear this question throughout the country. Furthermore, around common rate design. What happens when the rate design is more favorable in one area versus another? We've seen it in our current context where folks are willing to drive a little bit out of their way to fill up where gas may be cheaper, especially as we start to see prices hike. What does that mean in the context of EV charging infrastructure, where economics may be favorable in one area versus another, and how, and just being sure that we're asking ourselves these important questions so that we can come together to build comprehensive solutions. I think that the third kind of area that we see is just around the ownership model. Whether utilities or private sector should be owning EV charging infrastructure, or is it some combination of both? But how do we come to some level of common understanding to ensure that we're not over or under building, and understanding where and when EVs will show up on the grid. Again, I think it's important that we ask these questions early on proactively so that we can develop cohesive solutions for us here.
I really liked all the policy, regulatory, and tariff design answers there. I could just keep us going down that deep, dark rabbit hole. Let me go to the technology side, though. So I'm an ex-utility guy, and so priorities 1, 2, and 3 were safety. Priority 4 is reliability. And so right now we have these things that are plugging into the electric grid. And if you talk to a utility planner or a utility system operator, they don't like things plugging into their grid. And these aren't just right now, we're really thinking in terms of electric vehicles, in terms of the withdrawal, right, the charge off the system. But V2G, vehicle to grid, is a very intriguing concept when it comes to using these things, the cars, as a resource on the grid. And so that's just more planning, more operations. And so right now we have, so most of your electric vehicle batteries are nickel-based lithium batteries. Manufacturers are starting to look towards lithium phosphate, mostly because of cost. They're far more cheaper because of scale of manufacturing. Looking down the road, we could have solid state batteries. And with solid state, in international markets, it's really two-wheeled vehicles that are using the solid-state batteries. Now, on one hand, I say we don't really have that in this country. We have four-wheeled vehicles, yet the streets of Austin, it's an obstacle course of two-wheeled vehicles right now, so who knows where that goes. There's swap-out programs in international markets when it comes to the batteries. You take out the old and you put in the new. So how does the utility look at that? And how do they manage differently the charging of those resources? And then looking even further ahead, there is a major push, especially, not even especially in this country, everywhere, to move away from lithium-based electrochemical batteries. And there was a big push for hydrogen fuel cells. Completely different. Now you don't really have V2G, you have a different kind of charging station. And so all of these electrical endpoints are no longer electrical. And this is all probably not going to happen faster than increments of decades, but when it comes to utility planners, they think in increments of decades. When you make investments in utility infrastructure, it's not for 5 years. So regulators don't think that way either. If you have something that becomes redundant or out of date in 5 years, that's now a stranded asset and it's on the backs of your ratepayers, and no regulator wants that on their conscience. So technology changes quickly. These resources and how they're used and how they interact with the grid are going to change in utility years are going to change very quickly as well. So it's just something that we think about when we're talking to our clients. What does this landscape look like over the next decades?
That's awesome, John. Thank y'all. So one big barrier I see is workforce development. I'm projecting 20 to 50% year-over-year growth in our personal Austin Energy network. That doesn't include all the other charging stations here in Austin. And it takes 6 years to become a master electrician. Who is going to install all of these stations, and how are they going to be trained for the specific nature of charging station installations in public? It's not just installing any 240-volt outlet. These stations and sites have communication characteristics that have to be overcome, accessibility issues, and just experience issues to make the site worth visiting. We contract with a maintenance repair provider, and the airport reached out to Austin Energy for assistance repairing their ground level service equipment, which is all electric. And our very own contracted repair crew could not work on this very specific kind of charging infrastructure that the airport needed. And it just became very clear that there's this huge need for this specialized charging infrastructure, repairs and installations. And we're working with what is supposed to be the regional, and they say national best, white glove EVSE installation service. So I'm really focused on that, but it also has huge implications with the vulnerable communities, in that a lot of assembly plants and oil changing, traditional vehicles require a lot more maintenance and just parts to run those cars, and a lot more parts to assemble in the manufacturer of these vehicles. So there's just a lot of people whose jobs will become obsolete in this transformation, and we have this clear need for electricians to do the work. So we need to be very intentional about that transition and be aware that there are people losing their livelihood with this transition, and we have this huge need and opportunity for them. And so we need to work with regional education entities. We have a great community college network here, Austin Community College, we can work with. And Austin Energy has joined with regional public utilities, LCRA, CPS, and New Braunfels utility, to come up with a regional plan to address this workforce need and this shift of employment that we're going to experience. A lot of other barriers are with ADA just becoming, accessibility is very important to me, and currently Texas just provides a guideline for that. So we really need to come up with clear messaging and a standard nationally, so we make sure that everyone has access to this infrastructure, because right now it's kind of being put anywhere without guidance. And like John said, these are assets in the ground, and it's hard to just move them when we have people with accessibility needs finally needing them. As far as standardization, Austin Energy does its best to standardize its program offering. So we have 1,200 of these ports, and they're all the same pricing policy, and they're all identified by the same signage. So we do our best in that kind of experience, consistency, network management, trying to set the same kind of user experience with station reliability and troubleshooting with those stations. But what we've found is our own program isn't inclusive of other entities coming into that fold, and not really inclusive to all use cases as well. So we're really trying to open up that program some more. We're going to be launching a new program soon called the Independent Rebate, which will incentivize charging stations that choose not to join our Plug-in Everywhere network program. And that's always been an option, actually, but it wasn't well communicated to the community and to other charging station manufacturers. And now it will have its own standalone application. And I'm really excited to see how this will bring in some competition to our community and give our customers some options. But of course, there's standardization there. We want them to be OCPP compliant, and we want them to be accessible for ADA. We want proper signage and physical accessibility to the site. So we do standardization where we can, but we have to be careful of unintended consequences of that standardization.
Thank you. So many great points from all of y'all. I remember on my last flight where I actually had a conversation with a stranger for the whole flight was when I was talking to this super young mechanic who was about my age, and he made the most money at that mechanic shop because he was the only one that was willing to work on EVs and Teslas. So he made the most there as the youngest mechanic. But that's a really great point about workforce development and bringing them into all of this. So we've talked about so many challenges, from tariffs to customer service. How are y'all handling these challenges, or how do you think we can further help utilities to handle all of these challenges? And before you answer that, I'd also like to tell the audience that we'll be calling for questions in a few minutes, so feel free to submit any questions to Slido on the bottom of the PowerPoint, or we can hand you the mic as well if you'd like to come up here later. Not that one. But yeah, challenges and what advice you have.
I'll go first for this one. I mean, we're a consulting company, so we're information, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to guide our clients wherever they sit in this space. So on the manufacturing side, where are the technology needs going? Where are the political and social pushes going to take us? I mentioned just this really strong notion behind let's stop mining all this stuff and go for some more organic or environmentally sound technology platforms moving forward. And so we keep track of all that. On the other side, the tariff and rate design, just by way of example, we're the markets consultant for the Energy Storage Association before they moved over with ACP. And so it's just best practices when it comes to markets and tariffs. And how do we talk to ISO staff, we talk to federal and state regulators. Here's how you can position this to recognize safety and reliability while also enabling this stuff to come online. And then the business case, we have economic optimization tools to make it investment worthy. We talk to financial institutions just as much as we talk to commercial developers. And so it's, as the saying goes, we all like to be green until the green really involves money, and then it's, can we really even afford to do this? And so we try to help figure out, how do you build this stuff to make it green, and not necessarily relying on incentives all the time. I think incentives are critical, especially in early stage technology development, but I think fatigue eventually sets in, and someone is eventually going to complain about free money going to this cause. And so as we look at it as where do you hit that tipping point, and what do those economics have to look like to get you beyond that? So that's where we sit in the effort.
Great, and similar to John's role, as Guidehouse, we partner with a number of folks across the industry, including utilities, corporations, as well as government, to really help unlock new revenue streams, but also to launch and accelerate product and service offerings and reduce costs. We bring at Guidehouse deep industry expertise, but pair that with technical know-how. One example of that is we've partnered with a number of utilities to support development of strategic roadmaps to support them on their transportation electrification journey. So bringing together internal as well as external stakeholders to have buy-in in actionable, concrete steps that they can take to ultimately help them meet their goals. One of those first steps that utilities often like to take is a better understanding of knowing kind of when and where electric vehicles are going to hit the grid and impacts associated with such. So that's where that kind of data analytics and in-house platforms that we're able to bring in our vehicle analytics simulation tool, or VAST, where we are able to take a repeatable single source of truth platform and used tailored inputs from that utility to drive greater insights and into understanding EV adoption, charger needs, load impacts, mitigation strategies, and the financial analysis associated with such. Beyond kind of the EV charging infrastructure space, we also partner with utilities on their mobility program offerings. We bring, again, while every utility is different, we do our best to bring a standard set of tools and processes to help in that standardization process. And with the mobility programs, we bring a set of tools called Program Suite. And that really enables us to use those tools, adapt them accordingly for utilities, and help anywhere from kind of vendor qualification to customer intake to evaluation and continuous improvement of those programs. Kind of furthermore, the third kind of core capability our team is focused on is fleet electrification. And this is a big topic. I know that there's a good discussion coming up tomorrow around, but we see this as a huge opportunity. And we've partnered with a number of folks, including General Services Administration, or GSA, along with utilities in their fleet electrification journey. And we bring in what we call our Fleet Suite tool, our standard tool, where we're able to ingest large amounts of data to help clients understand how they should go about their electrification journey, when and which vehicles should they swap out, but also kind of partnering that with our Guidehouse Insights team that is able to have the kind of the knowledge of understanding of what models may be coming up 3-5 years down the line that have yet to hit the market and may be able to better meet the client's needs. Furthermore, kind of beyond some of the work that we're doing in supporting transportation electrification, I see there being a large opportunity as well as we look at consortiums. There's a large step forward in the announcement of the National Electric Highway Coalition and utilities kind of coming together to share best practices and learnings. And also streamline that customer experience as we spoke to earlier. But kind of really given the complexity of the challenge, building on that and bringing a multitude of stakeholders, including technology vendors, including OEMs and regulators, and last and certainly not least, the end-use customer to really kind of help solve the challenges that we have ahead of us.
That's great. Yeah, early on in Austin Energy's offerings, which were we celebrated our 10-year anniversary recently of our EV offerings and our EV team. But early on, I think it was 2014, we did get the assistance of a consultant when we joined a consortium with CPS Energy in San Antonio for a regional approach to EV planning called the Texas River Cities. And that document still guides our actions, and there's still things that I strive to meet for as far as best practices in that document. But a lot of our programs are in-house, and as I said, they're getting old now, so we have this kind of moment to really reflect on these programs and decide which of the programs can scale to this explosive level of adoption we're expecting. And I'm not confident that all of them will, and it's a matter of navigating our own customer information systems and billing systems and the sensitivities that I described before to determine what will be this 2.0 offering as EVs become more mainstream. And I would do a disservice to my utility if I did not describe these programs that we have to offer, so I will share them with you. It's Plug-in Everywhere. It's our level 2 charging network available to public EV drivers for only $4.17 a month. Anyone can sign up. Even if you are living outside of Austin, we let anyone sign up for that program at austinenergy.com. We also have a home rebate for the installation of a level 2 charging station up to 50% or $1,200. It's one of the most generous rebate programs in the nation. We have a commercial program for rebates up to $4,000 per station if you join that Plug-in Everywhere network, and we're working on that independent rebate, which is up to $1,500 per station. We have a rate, EV360, that encourages off-peak residential charging. And recently, in the last few years, we did a big push on outreach. We created the Buyer's Guide, which is an online resource for new and used real-time inventory of EVs here in Austin. And we got over 150,000 views since its inception just 2 years ago. And we also partnered with local dealerships to set up educational kiosks to really demystify electric fuel with a simple color numeric coding system so people can easily match their car with their charge need with the station. And we have EVs for Schools, which is an in-school education program, including virtual reality that really teaches the benefits of electrification to students so they go home and bug their parents about getting an electric vehicle. And we've placed level 2 charging stations at area schools to support that program. And just really, really, we're all about education, getting butts in seats, and that's the best way to transition people to an electric vehicle, is getting them to drive it. So we really want to reach those people.
Yeah. Beautiful. I haven't heard of a utility with so many programs for EV adoption. And one more program, I don't know if it's still active, but there was a massive rebate if someone bought an electric bicycle.
Yes. Oh, goodness. E-Ride. Up to $400 for an electric bike.
Yeah, I took advantage of that too. And I remember Carl was saying that y'all have never gotten so many personal notes to your office before saying thank you. And people would write saying, like, I was able to ride a bike for the first time in years because it could help them get pushed over a hill. And that was really emotional for people. So thank you all for joining us for this panel. I don't know if we have any questions from Slido, but please come up and ask any questions if you'd like to.
So, kind of looking at EV adoption and looking more towards like fleet vehicles or even just massive charging stations, what's kind of the plan on this infrastructure that we're going to have to put in for the electricity, like battery systems or maybe renewable sources? Be really easy to put in peaker plants, but we're trying to go more carbon neutral, reduce our carbon intensity. And I know like CPS, they have a coal power plant. I'm from San Antonio. They still have a coal power plant. They're trying to eventually shut that down, maybe move over to their gas power plants. So how are they gonna put in that, or Austin Energy or any other utility, how how are they going to put in that power that they're going to have to replace to make these EVs even more green?
So we are developing a demand response program for residential charging, which will utilize communication signals from the charging station. And we're hoping it'll start as a demand response program to just avoid those, those peaks during the summer, the really, really hot days, which will save the whole community money because electricity is just really expensive for a utility to purchase at that price. But then we will evolve that program into a behavioral program encouraging just off-peak charging consistently throughout time. And what that will do is act as a virtual power plant and avoid costly infrastructure upgrades before they're due. And we can manage, kind of orchestrate the location of those charges and plan out with our already planned infrastructure upgrades the right place and right time to do those transformer upgrades to accommodate all the added charging. Our Plug-in Everywhere program is connected with Austin Energy's Green Choice offering, which is the purchase of certified green energy credits. So that's great. When you plug into a Plug-in Everywhere station, you are filling up your car on 100% renewable energy. But the great thing about living in Texas is we've got a lot of wind power. If you're charging at night, you can reliably know that a lot of that generation mix is wind energy, and Texas is a national leader in that. So we're doing a lot to accommodate that. Our Plug-in Everywhere network is all communicating stations that have the capability of demand response, but we're really hesitant to explore that because it is public and people depend on that charge to get home. So we're much more excited about diving into the residential space for demand response right now. But we do have plans, especially for workplaces. Those are great partners because they kind of have some control over their employees and can incentivize on their own to not charge at the end of the day when we have the peaks.
One question, we have a lot from the audience, so thank you. Most of the discussion has been about EVs for residential customers or passengers. What about the programs for commercial EVs and fleet owners?
So we are very excited to offer programs that are directly focused for those use cases. So we have a rebate for multifamily and commercial account holders, but it's so broad in nature that no one's really getting the information they need to make the decisions they need to make. I think in our attempt to be inclusive with that program, the unintended consequences, we weren't really informing any of the use cases good enough. So what we'll end up doing is having multiple kind of versions of the same rebate. So the incentive will probably be about the same, and even the application platform that we put it on will almost be identical to each other, but the way we communicate it to fleets and meet them where they are with the resources that they need, I'm talking virtual toolkits, monthly virtual seminars where we can do Q&As, and just speaking to them in the language that they're used to be spoken to would be a huge step up. Our utility has the same bad habit of other utilities where we talk to the customers as we perceive them in our billing system, commercial account holder, residential account holder, and that's not necessarily what someone identifies themselves when seeking out information on our programs to install a charging station. So we're due for a website overhaul, and it's a great time. We're really positioning ourselves for this explosive growth. It's really exciting, but we have a lot to do and a lot of self-reflection to meet that moment.
I'm not at all speaking universally, but I think generally when you look at fleet versus, I'm so used to the term residential passenger vehicles, you're talking a bigger electrical impact, right? The batteries are bigger, the charge profile is bigger, but I think it's a little more consistent and predictable and stable. I'll use school buses as an example. You pretty much know where the school bus is going every day of a 365-day calendar year. When it's parked, you know where it's going to be parked and for how long. You certainly find usage patterns down at the residential level, but I still think you might need a little bit more flexibility when it comes to passenger vehicles than fleet.
Yeah, in addition to what John and Lindsay mentioned, I think what we often see in the commercial arena, in addition to your make-ready programs to support that EV charging infrastructure installment and incentives, but also that commercial advisory services and kind of walking and, for lack of a better term, holding that customer's hand through that journey, not only to understand, which vehicles and when, as mentioned a little bit earlier, but also kind of working with them on that education and awareness, understanding the operational challenges, and again, engaging the workforce to operate and maintain those vehicles differently than they would otherwise. So those commercial advisory services can really help commercial customers make that leap and take that journey in a more meaningful way than they would otherwise without that additional support here.
Thank you. And thank you all for your time today. We've been running over, so also thank you for your patience. I'm sure you can hear some of the buzz outside, and I hope you have a chance to meet and answer any of the unanswered questions from our panelists today, and have a great day. Thank you.